Today, we are welcoming back someone whose presence always brings depth, gentleness, and truth. Christine Ruch. Even as she joins us while, recovering from her challenging health, and she continues to embody the resilience and self awareness that lie at the heart of her healing philosophy. I'm truly glad that Christine joins us in this journey. And to talk about her journey, Christine's journey into nervous system restoration and body mind soul integration has not only transformed her own life, but has become a guiding light for so many others. And in today's conversation, we explore what it truly means to listen to the body's intelligence, to rebuild inner safety, and to reconnect with the parts of ourselves we often overlook. I'm so grateful she's here, and I can't wait for us to dive in and just take a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's dive in. Firstly, thank you, Christine. Thank you for being on the show. It's such an honor to host you.
Thank you for the invitation. It means a lot to me.
That's great. Okay, to start with, you often speak about how nervous system restoration it reshaped your entire relationship with yourself, and that is so great. So, I want to know, how did your body signals show up differently for you, and how did you realize that nervous system restoration is something that is helping you? And yes, so how was your whole experience of it?
Yeah, it was quite a journey for sure. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I like the word restoration because it's a process and it's a journey unto itself. And it's a process that encompasses a number of different modalities and nuances. It's not just a one way in. Um, and I will say, like, stepping back to, I've had multiple sclerosis for 20 years, and I've managed it really successfully with using natural means and diet and lifestyle modification and things like that. And it's been incredibly powerful. But my life was also really rigid, and I had a lot of rules for myself, and I didn't have a lot of like space to play, so to speak. I didn't have a lot of freedom and flexibility in the lifestyle that I created for myself to keep my symptoms at bay. And so, on one hand, I look like a huge success because I never had to take pharmaceutical intervention. And I went to yoga and I had a very highly successful business. And so, from the outside, I looked like I was doing all the right things, and in many ways I was, but I didn't know anything about how to create a relationship with my nervous system. That was sort of like, I was sort of nebulous and not necessarily something that felt like it was achievable. And and it wasn't until like a number of things in my life happened that showed me that I was kind of doing it in an incomplete way, right? Like that there was more to the nature of healing and like yeah, it's like one thing to have a good lifestyle and have an excellent diet, but it's not quite enough for certain health conditions. And especially something like multiple sclerosis, which is a condition of the nervous system. And once I started doing this work in earnest, I recognized, well, number one, how multi layered it is, how multifaceted. Our nervous system does do a lot for us. And really learning how to meet your nervous system, but more, not necessarily more than that, but a big portion of that is really learning how to build capacity. I didn't have I didn't have a wide range of emotional, like, awareness, I mean, I've always been a really happy-go-lucky and joyous person, but also, I don't know, I just didn't have a big connection to the range of emotions, and I also didn't understand, like, that you can hold all that is and hold everything that you feel, and that energy is just emotion is just energy in motion. And I had to learn a lot about building emotional capacity, um, and not creating stories or belief systems from the emotions that I felt. A lot of times we think we are our emotions and we create a story around that. And then I create an identity around those stories. And then from the stories and the identity, then we make decisions. And those decisions are kind of in service of keeping our nervous system dysregulated and keeping that story that you tell yourself about who you are intact. And what if none of that's true? And what if you can bypass all of these things by just learning these subtle different techniques of creating with your nervous system, and then all of a sudden all of your health starts to change all by itself without you even trying and going in and saying, "Oh, that's what's wrong with me." But actually, what if nothing's wrong with you? What if everything is actually exactly perfect? It's just the way you relate to it and your relationship with it. And if you're willing to shift your paradigm, then all of a sudden your body meets you, and miraculous things happen.
That is so, so true. And that is so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Because, many listeners, they feel subtle cues, but they don't yet trust themselves. And thank you for sharing your story with us today and your experience. It might help them recognize their own inner guidance. And I'm so glad you shared that with us.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
To continue, as we were talking about people who sometimes they just don't understand the cues, and for someone who feels disconnected or overwhelmed about the whole situation regarding their surrounding or whatever is going around them, what is the earliest, most subtle sign that their nervous system needs attention? And how can they notice that? Because sometimes we just live in this delusion that okay, everything is sorted, we'll just take a nap and everything will be sorted. But sometimes our nervous system, it needs attention. So what are the most subtle signs that can be experienced by people, but they just ignore it?
Well, there are so many, and actually, they range from being subtle to blatantly in your face. And we just label it as something different in our culture and society. Doesn't necessarily have a language around this or a way in which to share this with people. And so we overlook it and we blame it on other things. And so it could be something like insomnia. It could be your emotional state. It could be your stress levels. It could be high blood pressure, it could be high blood sugar. It could be an autoimmune disease. It could be your relationship with your job, with your partner, with your children, with your community. It could be your relationship with yourself. There's so many ways. And so we think like, oh, I have high blood pressure. And so we do all of these other things. Like diet is obviously very important, but you go to the doctor and you get high blood pressure medicine, but you don't actually look at the fact that like your lifestyle choices keep your blood pressure high. And you want this pill to take the place of the changes that you should be making by looking honestly at what it is that you do. And in some ways, it's like people feel like there's some fault to themselves, and they're not. Like, this is just the human experience. This is just how it rolls to be a human in this world, right? And so it's actually a way to kind of pause and rejoice. Like our body is always talking to us. But I do love what you said about sometimes it can feel overwhelming and you're not really sure is it's like hard to like speak the language or understand the language at first. And so that does end up being confusing for people and also induces another layer of like anxiety and concern. Like, what if I'm not doing it right? What if I misread my cues? Like, how do I know? And so I think it's just about this whole idea of creating full allowance for all that is. Like, there's nothing to fix, there's nothing to change, there's nothing to do. It's just a simple act of observance. And that's it. Like at the very beginning is to just observe what you're beginning to notice about how you feel, an emotion attached to a symptom, an emotion attached to a circumstance or an event that happens, and just to begin the act of observation. And in the act of observation, just the recognition of all that is. And you just recognize, and you don't need to fix anything. It's just the process begins all by itself, just with observing. And the act of observation is incredibly powerful. And slowly you begin to recognize you have a full range of things that you can notice about yourself. And if you start just really subtly with taking away any of like, how it comes sometimes we build emotions on emotions, right? So like we might feel really upset about something. And so we feel that sensation of being upset and then we then label that being upset as something else, right? Like, oh, I'm always upset. I'm always mad. Like, I'm such an angry person. Or let's say something makes it sad. And so there's that first emotion of sadness. But then we label that sadness, we judge that sadness, and we're like, gosh, I am always depressed. I must be a really depressed person. And then you create a story of the fact that you're a depressed person because you feel sadness at these circumstances. Does that make sense? And so it's like you kind of end up spiraling in a lot of ways when none of that's actually true. Like, what if you could just hold the sadness and not let it identify you? And, so it's just a matter of creating at the very beginning, creating allowance and just allowing yourself to feel all that you're feeling without labeling it, judging it, and identifying with it and telling yourself another story that there's something wrong with you for whatever it is that you're feeling. And so just like it's funny how you would not imagine that, like going back to my example of high blood pressure, you would not imagine that that would shift your blood pressure. But in fact, you think, what am I going to do about my blood pressure problems? And it's like, what if we don't have to actually address your blood pressure? Your body knows exactly what to do. You don't need to go in mentally and try to figure that out and second guess your body. Your body knows exactly what it needs to do. We just need to give it space to do its job. And so, what if the act of creating the space for it to do its job is just to observe your emotions when they arise and practice not telling a story about those emotions, but just building the capacity to hold an emotional state without acting from it and without creating a secondary story around it. Those are just like some little ways that we can start with the process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are so many things that you've said, and I totally resonate with that. And I love the line that you said that we build around emotions on emotions. And we usually, again, we ignore that we're, just looping our emotions around and making it more complex than, going with the flow and understanding that, okay, it's life. It can be, sorted sometimes, and there's no pressure for it. But I totally understand and resonate with whatever you said, and thank you again for that. So if I talk about your work, it closely aligns with individuals experiencing long-term stress. And I want to know that what emotional or behavioral pattern do you see most often when, a nervous system is in a state of overload, burnout, or what is that peak, prime, and very primitive emotion or behavior that you see around in people?
Well, that's such an insightful question because, like with multiple sclerosis specifically, and this is lots of different ways, the body has only a finite amount of ways that we express dis-ease or, a lack of harmony. And so there's so many symptoms that overlap, right? And so, you know, some symptoms that could be like categorized as multiple sclerosis can also be shared by other conditions, right? But with regards to somebody with a deeply dysfunctional nervous system, this is where your nervous system is not operating in service of your best and highest good. Um, but one of the things that's so fascinating about it is people, and I speak about this from personal experience. We have a very um, different relationship with stress. A lot of times we don't actually feel it. We either don't feel it, we don't feel it in our body. This is a disconnection from our mind and our body. And we are so disconnected from our body and the sensations within our body that we actually don't recognize when we are stressed. And what that could look like is a number of different things. Somebody who says they thrive on stress, that stress makes them a better person and they are able to achieve more in a stressful environment. And thing is a lot of us, and then this whole idea of like creating stories around the emotions, it's like I wasn't able to see the stress that I had. I had this unhealthy relationship with stress. And and then I took a lot of pride in my ability to handle stress. And I took a lot of pride in taking on more stress to feel more because I thought that that meant that I had an inordinate amount of capacity to hold stress that other people couldn't hold. When in fact, I just had an inordinate capacity to put, to be in denial about the amount of stress that I was experiencing. I had a very dysfunctional relationship with stress and a lot of denial around what was indeed stress. And then I took a lot of pride in that story. Does that make sense? And then created circumstances to reaffirm all of that over and over and over again until yeah, until it's didn't work anymore, you know?
It totally makes sense, and it's very human. Thank you for that. I love the shift. And to add on to that, firstly, I love the whole story. And thank you for that again. And as I said, it totally, totally makes sense because, these are our life experiences and they shape who you are. And uh, to add on to this, I have something that, the shift from protection to presence, it is very, very powerful. And once we learn about these patterns, when we learn about these behaviors, um, and if we recognize them, that is the, initial step and the best that you can do for yourself because, recognizing is the first step and many of us lack that. So thank you for that. Also, across all the modalities that you have explored, which practice becomes essential for someone trying to rebuild inner safety from the inside out? And any practice that you feel very, if it's very simple, works, or whatever which worked for you might work for people.
Yeah, I think like the easiest way in, I mean, some of these things that I'm talking about are definitely sometimes they're not available to people when they very first begin their healing journey and they first begin to take ownership of their health. I apologize. And they start to realize that they are worth more and they are ready for something more in a deeper level of healing. And one of the best ways is really with food. And it's not just like, "Oh, I need to change my diet," but it's really about learning to honor yourself and honor the way in which you send a signal of safety to your body by what you choose to eat. And sometimes we don't recognize that there's this really incredible dynamic relationship with food. And a lot of people are unconscious around the food that they eat on one hand, or they're hyper vigilant about the food that they eat on the opposite end of the spectrum. And rather, it's not necessarily about that as much as about cultivating a relationship of worth, of self worth. Like, my body is worth this. And I am worth taking the time to prepare food thoughtfully. My body is worth like investing in it by making different food choices. Um, my body is worth me taking time to eat with deliberation and gratitude. And so some of those things I like starting with because you eat 3 times a day. And it's a way of immediately affirming to yourself all the time your self-worth. And it's a way of signaling to your body safety, and it's a way of honoring yourself and your body will respond immediately because it will recognize that it's being honored. And so some of those are sort of simple ways that we can begin to reframe our relationship with ourselves and relationship with our well-being and begin to cultivate a deeper connection to our health journey.
That is so, so true. So, so true. And to continue with that question, because I actually want you to add up to this too. Um, we've talked about nervous system, we've talked about body, we've talked about science, and I feel this is a way where people try to unite their body, mind, and soul. So, what belief or misconception tends to block their progress the most? Because okay, we understand, we analyze what the problem is, or if sorry, I should not call it a problem, what the what the patterns are, and to analyze what we want to analyze the framework. But sometimes there are so many blocks that come in between, and it's a human life, and you can't run away from challenges and blocks that come away in your path. So how do you deal with those blocks of misconception or whatever other blocks that you faced, and how do you ask people to also follow something which helps them with clearing their blocks as well?
Yeah, that's such a really good question because deeply believe that, we are born with these source codes for healing and our body knows how to heal. And it's just really about cultivating the right environment, both within us and outside of us, to allow those source codes to awaken and align. And a lot of my work is about alignment. And this is what you just said, the alignment of your mind, your body, your soul, the spirit. And a lot of that is transcending your mental thinking self and becoming more embodied. And that is your mind is in service of your body, not the other way around. This is how we mostly all live. Like, we live mostly from our heads, and our body is just the vehicle that carries our head around. And and instead of like cultivating this relationship where your body is actually in charge and within your body is your soul and and then we do this with this whole example of this nervous system, right? And so you go in and you start creating this different relationship with your nervous system. It's the interface between all that is with within you and outside of you. And it's because, our nervous system is a sensing, feeling thing that senses the world around us, and it also senses everything that's happening within us in order to keep us safe. And if we can work with our nervous system in this very specific way and create this different relationship, slowly what ends up happening is you go from this place of being overly identified with your thinking mind to becoming way more in presence with your heart and your soul and your body. And it becomes a more of an embodied place of living. And then in that act of embodiment, then alignment just sort of naturally happens. And it's really another example of like your body knows exactly what to do, your nervous system knows exactly what to do We want to make it more complicated. And actually, we don't want to actually believe it could be that simple because societally, culturally, we're used to making things very complicated. And we believe that you need all of these experts to like show us the way, and doctors and experts and all of this stuff. And but what if there's a way that's really gentle, very loving, and very soft, that isn't forcing, that doesn't have expectations for achievement or milestones that you have to hit? And what if it's an entirely different way? And what if we can rest in the simplicity of just trusting the process of coming home to yourself in these gentle, gentle, slow ways, and trust that your body knows exactly what to do. And then our head can just take a back seat for once. And then the other thing that actually ends up happening in this embodiment process is you end up learning to love yourself so much because you're in awe and complete, like, utter awe of what your body can actually do if you can trust that your body knows what to do, and create this space within yourself to allow that to happen. And that creates with building capacity and building trust and learning to listen to your body. And it's a slow process, but it's a simple process if you just trust and allow that your body has wisdom that's greater than our mind could possibly ever imagine.
Again, so true, and I resonate with it so much. And to again add on to that, that moment of coherence, when we bring in um, those blocks, they go away, and that moment when we realize that, okay, this can be life altering. And thank you, Christine. Your insights, they may help listeners recognize when they're on the edge of it, and when do they need to run away, or just say whoosh whoosh to their blocks. So that is great. And again, thank you for sharing your presence and wisdom with such honesty and grace. Your work, it reminds us that healing is not something that we chase, it's something we build through relationship with ourselves. And to everybody listening, may this conversation invite you to slow down, breathe, and truly listen to the intelligence living within your body and mind. Restoration begins with awareness, and unity begins with intention. And with that, thank you for joining us today. Until next time, keep returning to yourself with gentleness and curiosity. I, Pragya Malvya, signing off.